Hello everyone, welcome to the next session of SAP Basis Training. In this session we will be discussing about how to set up TMS, that is Transport Management System. So first of all we will learn some terms, what is landscape or system landscape or transport domain as well as transport group. Then we will learn how we can set up the domain, how we can configure the transport controllers. After that we will also learn how to configure the transport route, or how we can define the transport group, transport route. Then at last we will also see how to set up or how the QA approval process will be set up, how we can do QA approval in your TMS, that is Transport Management System. So as a basis consultant, as a system administrator, as a SAP basis consultant, it is very important that you understand the role of individual systems as well as individual clients. So once we understand the each system and each client, for what reason this is being used, that's what we have seen in our previous sessions, then you will be able to configure the transport management system based on the purpose of each system and each client. So after you installing the first SAP system, you need to perform some customizing or development activities. Let's say you may not require to do development activities if you use standard SAP. However, you need to do customizing activity in all the cases. We also do development cases, most developments in most of the cases. In my experience, I never seen that SAP system does not have any customer development object or customer owned programs, because when you are inheriting some existing existing legacy systems, the business may be already used to some of the legacy reports, so it is not very easy just to change it to SAP standard, since it is normal that we create lot of development, lot of customer owned developments in order to synchronize with the legacy system, or in order to keep the same reporting standards as before in the development system. So it is possible that you will do quite a lot of development. It is sure that you will do quite a lot of customizing. So it is very important to record this configuration in a proper manner, meaning to say you should be able to track and control all the customizing as well as development changes which is happening in your SAP landscape. This is the list of prerequisites which is required to configure the TMS system in your landscape. That means which is done during or maybe after installation of SAP system. That means before you start configuring the STMS. So before installing your SAP system or your database, you need to define the network structure of SAP landscape. What kind of network you are going to use, that of course you will work along with your network team as well as the system administrators to how you are going to design the SAP system landscape network. Then you will install the hardware as well as operating system of SAP system, because this is quite important, what kind of operating system you are using. It is possible that one system is in a Windows operating system and another systems are in, for example, Linux or Unix operating system. It is possible, but my recommendation will be, if you are starting a new SAP implementation or new SAP installation in your entire landscape, then you need to define which operating system you are going to use. If you mix up the operating system, it is possible it will work, because SAP give you options even in STMS as well, that you can have heterogeneous systems where you can also configure the landscape using heterogeneous systems. But the best recommendation will be use homogeneous systems, so that you do not have a problem of changing the operating system in the SAP landscape. So you need to define what kind of hardware you are going to use, what kind of operating systems you are going to use. So this is the first prerequisite we need to define, because STMS also depends on your hardware as well as operating system. Because if you use, for example, different operating system, when we go to further detail in our this particular session, as well as we also seen this briefly before, that the files, when you are creating a TR or when you are creating a transport request, these files are saved in the local drive. Then we need to find out a way that how we can share this file in different operating system. However, if you use single operating system, this is going to be quite easy, because one operating system file can be read by another operating system quite easily. That authorizations, the authentication and the authorization within the OS is going to be same, so it's quite easy. This transfer from one operating system to the another system, and since it's the same operating system, is going to be quite easy. So it is very important, you need to design the system such a way that you use same operating system to make it quite easier. During the SAP installation, we also need to create one common directory, that is one common transport directory, which contains or which saves all the TR files, the transport files, the raw files, into one common directory, which should be accessible for each SAP system. This can be one common directory, or it can also be more than one. Let's say if you have different domains, then you can have more than one. Then you can share this information from one place to another. It can be more than one directory in general condition. Let's say if you have 3 system landscape, small system landscape, then you will have one directory which saves all the information in the 3 system, will share this particular directory, or 3 system can access this particular transport directory. In complex scenarios, you can have more than one. In that case also, we need to make sure the directories can be accessed by the SAP system in order to copy the files from one SAP landscape domain to another SAP landscape domain. This is all again in the OS level we will do that, and you need to have sufficient authorization to do that. That's a main point here. So we have to keep in mind that we need to have a common transport directory during the installation of your SAP system. And one more thing we need to remember is that after a system is been installed, that you need to set up CTO, the change transport organizer. This we seen it before, in order to change the packages, whether we can define it modifiable or not modifiable. However, when we went to the transaction code SE06, we seen a different option, which we did not really look into that at that time. The option is basically that you can initialize the change transport organizer. You can initialize the TMS system, meaning to say, let's say you copied the SAP system from one SAP system to another SAP system. So the configuration of STMS can be different from one landscape to another landscape, or you are making a copy of the system and creating another one system name. Then the existing transport management or existing TMS will be different. Okay, even though we will do the configuration of TMS in each system separately, so it is important that you initialize all these TMS configurations using SE06, then you will start configuring. in general we will do the configuration in the transaction code STMS, but in SE06 when you go, you can initialize. Let's go to the system, then we can see this more detail. Now let's go to this transaction SE06. So far what we have seen is the system change option. Okay, here also we can do the post installation activity for transport organizer, that is the to initialize, that is to perform the initialization activity. If it is a standard installation, you can select standard installation, you can say post installation action, or if let's say you it's a database copy or database migration, you can make a copy of the existing system in a database level and you can create a new system. That is also possible. Or if it is a migration, you migrated from one system to another system, then you can do the post installation activities here. If it is standard installation, you select standard installation and you will say perform post installation activity. When you select that, do you want to reinstall the CTS, single system setting? So what happens is now it will reinstall, that means reset the entire CTS configuration to the single settings configuration. That means it just simply reset the entire settings. Okay, this anyway, this is a fresh installation, we will just leave it like this for time being. This is only required if, let's say, this is a copy or migration. Otherwise all the TMS activity, configuring the TMS, is done in the transaction code STMS. If you go to the transaction code STMS, so this is the transaction code. You will do all the TMS, transport management system configuration, as well as you can also do the transport of your TRs in this particular transaction code. We will see how to configure this one step by step. Let's go to the presentation again, continue to understand what is the terms and how do we start configuring the TMS system. So as we discussed, the transport directory is one common directory which is accessible for all the system in the landscape. Right now let us take the very simple example. Let's assume our system landscape is a 3-system landscape. You have a development system, quality system and production system. Each have one client which needs to be connected. Now we have a transport directory which is accessible for all these systems. Okay, inside each directory we have different folders for different purposes. We will see that one again in more detail. This transport directory is basically accessible for all the systems. Let's say if it is an Windows system, then we will using the SAP MNT share to call this particular directory. So if we go to our SAP system, let's say to our remote, so we are logged in remotely to our SAP system. If you go to the C drive, this is what we have. Our USR SAP is our USR, and we have SAP, this trans. Okay, this is the directory, is the transport directory for this particular server. How do we call this server? For example, if you go here, let me give the the server name of our SAP system. If I go to ECC demo, from this server we are trying to call, let's say ECC ADM. So when I call the particular server, you can see two shares. Okay, one is the SAP log and you can see SAP MNT. Okay, if I double click here, you can see it will take you to the particular directory, the one which we have seen here. Okay, SAP MNT trans. So the ECC demo SAP MNT trans is the directory for the transport, is the transport directory of this particular SAP system. Okay, so how this is defined inside SAP? If you log into our SAP system, if you go to the directories using the transaction code /n AL11, here you can display the directories as we know before. And if we go to dir trans, you can see here dir trans is ECC demo /SAP MNT trans. Okay, if you double click, you can see this is the folders within this SAP transport directory, which is called from our OS. Okay. So let's say if it is a Unix system, the path will be little different here. The system will be defined as /usr/SAP/trans. Based on the mount point, it will automatically picks up that particular trans for a Unix system. Now let's go back to our presentation. Now let's see what is the use of each directory within this trans. The first directory is called bin. This particular directory keeps the configuration file of your transport, the configuration file of the TMS system, because when you configure the TMS, we need to keep all the informations, what is the development system, where this is being saved, this kind of information. Whatever we are going to configure in the STMS needs to be saved somewhere. This will be saved in this particular directory. Okay, there is two files you can find. One is tp_domain name.pfl and another one is domain.pfl, domain.config. There is two files. Basically the pfl file is used for the tp command. TP is basically an external program which is triggered by SAP to import or to run the imports in the OS level. So if we go to this particular directory, let's call it from a SAP system. If we go to bin, you can see two files. First one is domain.config and another one is tp_domain_ecc.plf. Okay, if you open the domain, you can see ECC, this is the system number, the TMS ADM is the user which will be used for transports, and all the domain informations you can see. Okay, and TP domain.pfl, this will have the configuration file which is related to the TP. Okay, this is directory bin. And the next directory is buffer. This particular directory keeps the transport buffer for each SAP system. Basically this buffer indicates which are all the transports which requires to be imported in the particular system. Okay, that is buffer. And next one is, let's see the data. The data directory contains some files of the TR, of the transport request, which has the part of data. That means all the data which is saved into the raw file are saved into this data. The data contains the transport files which contains the actual data of the transport request. Okay, that means all relevant parts of your objects, of the SAP objects, are saved in a transport file that will be kept inside this directory data. Now let's go back. Next one is co-file. We have data, then co-file. The co-file also contains the information related to particular transport request. However, the co-file contains the, for example, some commands or the information related to that particular transport request. For example, it can be transport type, whether it's a workbench transport or customizing transport, this kind of information. Then object class, what kind of object class we seen before, how to add an objects, and what kind of import steps are required. Meaning to say, let's say when you are importing, for example, our roles, okay, we need to import the roles and we need to do the post activities. We need to generate this profile or whatever it could be. Or if you are importing a, for example, a program, once you import the programs, once you finish this program, you need to generate the screens. There is some import steps which will be different from one object to another object. This will be defined in the scope files. And the, let's say in general, the post installation activities or access in the scope file. So we have two main important folders, that is data and co-file, which contains the actual data of your transport file or your TR, the transport request. So the data directory contains the data file which contains the actual data, we can say. The co-file contains one file which contains the technical details, we can say technical details of the particular TR. Okay, that's co-files and data files. So whenever you release a TR, we create a TR, this is the two directory which will hold the actual information about this particular TR. Data files will contain the actual data and the co-file contains the relevant technical details of this particular data. Then let's see log, for example. The log contains the transport log or the statistics of the particular TR. So let's say when you create a TR, who created the TR, when it is released, these are all the logs. This is also very important. So these kind of informations are kept in the directory log. Then let's come to temp. Okay, the temp contains the temporary log files. Okay, this is log which contains the actual log. Temp contains the temporary data as well as the temporary log files. Then let's see SAP names. This contains the informations belong to the transport request per SAP user. The SAP name contains the information belonging to a transport request per user. That means the information per SAP user will be available SAP names. Then we have one more important directory which is very particular, which is for download directory for SAP support packages. This is, now you may think what is to do with transport, why it is in the transport. Okay, we will come to that later, how to import this support packages into the system. The support packages also, you can say, kind of a transport. You will get a file, yeah, raw file. So how do we put this one? Using this EPS directory. So EPS directory contains support packages. Okay, support packages are saved in the EPS directory. How do we use it? We will come to that later stage. So this is the directory structures. We also seen, let's say, if it is a two different operating system, how are we going to manage it? How do we call this particular share from Unix? This is going to be quite tricky. Let's say you keep your transport directory in Windows, but your another system which is in Unix, then it's going to be quite tricky. So for that, SAP released its own nodes for, as we seen before, every SAP issues or the known informations are released as nodes. So this also have particular node. You can get this information from OSS. The node number is 8327. You can also open this node. Okay, this is an SAP node which is related to transport system in heterogeneous system group. In this node they are given step by step how to install this kind of scenarios. Then you can follow this node to do the heterogeneous system setup. In general, we don't do this. In general, in my personal recommendation will be to use the same OS, but in some cases, if you have some situation like this, then you can follow this node and you can do the setup. Then it will help you to set up that kind of scenarios. So what we have seen is, this is the transport directory which is used for different purposes, and this particular transport directory should be accessible for each SAP system in your landscape. So what we have seen is, the transport basically enables you to synchronize the customizing or the development activity in multiple system in your SAP landscape, or to, let's say, to transfer the changes from your development system to quality and the productive systems. So in order to do this one, the transport route should be defined, or transport route should be defined. What direction you are going to transport from development to quality, then quality to production. This has to be defined. So as we seen before, to define the transport route, we need to have transport directory, which enables the SAP system landscape to save the data file and the core file as well as the log file. So how does it happens? So when you define the transport route, what do you want to do? How do you want to transport this one? This is the route. Let's assume that we have a 3 system landscape. We have development system, quality system, and productive system. So from development system, once you finish some of your activity, the development activity, you need to export the relevant objects as a transportable format, as a transport request to the common directory. So once it is copied over, so how does it happens? It will copy over all the changes, all the objects which you have developed in the SAP system into a raw file, and it saves into the common directory. Then this file or this information will be imported to the quality systems database or quality system to do the testing. Okay, but the file is still available in the transport directory. Once it's exported, it will be available. You will just import this one, and this modification will be available in the quality system. Then you will do the testings. Once the testing is done, then the same file will be imported to production. Okay, the same format. Once everything is fine, you assume everything is fine, then it will be imported into productive system. Then you will have approval process, of course, in that, then it will be imported in the productive system. Let's say now you may have a question, if suppose we have a problem, then what will happen? In that kind of cases, you will do the modification again, and you will have another transport which will be created for the second modification to fix the errors what you have found in a quality assurance system. Then you will have the second transport, you will import the second transport. So you will have two transport in that cases to fix. First one is the actual program, let's assume. The second one is to fix the bug. Okay, so once that is fine, then you will import that two files in sequence in the same way you have imported the quality to the production. This is the way it's going to work. And the export import means it is not moving of objects, yeah, it is just copying of objects. Let's say you create a program, you export that program to a TR, that means the program is still available here. You will just create a copy into a raw format as a package, then you will import it here. When the import time also, that file, that the actual TR file will be still available in the transport directory, which you can import into production or a different systems in the later stages. So the import export activity is not moving activity, is basically a copying activity. Next, let's see little more concepts and technology behind TMS. Depending on the size of an organization, the scope of SAP implementation may change. This can vary based on the customizing activity or the development of the particular projects. For example, you will have customizing activity which is done quite a lot, as well as development objects, and then that means the ABAP program which is created can be quite a lot, that you need to transport each and every changes to your QA testing system. Then you need to approve these changes to the productive landscape. So using the transport management concept, you can centrally configure the change and transport system, that is a TTS system, in your SAP landscape. Whereas you will be able to centrally configure the entire system, as well as you will be able to manage the TMS system, the transport request, centrally from the TMS. That means the import process, you can centralize the entire import process. However, the transport strategy will be based on your predefined transport routes. For example, if you see it here, we have two different landscapes, which is one landscape it for example here system landscape for Asian region and system landscape for European region. Say let's assume you have one productive server for Asia Pacific and one productive server for Europe, and you have two different landscape. However, all the systems are in one transport domain, so that the transport TMS can be centrally controlled. Okay, you have two development systems. See, in many of the cases, if you see in a bigger systems, the number of changes which may happen in the SAP system, it can be quite high. It can vary from 100 to thousands. Okay, so you will have transport methodologies to do the transports to productive systems in different ways. When let's say when the productive system is not in the service window meaning to say when the users are active, then you will do the transport in the system, in the productive systems, in order to reduce the impact of your actual business. So these transports can be centrally managed in these type of cases. Moreover, the activities which is carried out in each respective system can be controlled by authorization in detail. Let's say when you are configuring a TMS, you basically define the role of each system in the landscape. Okay, whether it's a development system or a QA system or production system. QA system means quality assurance as well as approval system. You can also configure the approval step in the QA, or if let's say you want to have a separate approval system, then you can have one more system in the middle of QA as well as PR, which will be used only for approval process. That also possible. You can have one QA system in the middle, so that you can have a one approval system in the middle, so that the QA system is separated from the actual approval systems. And so using the TMS, you will be able to define the system landscape and the system role or the client role and individual systems in the entire transport domain, as well as you will be able to configure the transport route using the standard transport route, or you will also able to configure the transport route by yourself. You can configure the transport route using the STMS or TMS. You will also be able to use the standard transport routes. Otherwise, let's say if you want to have a different QA in the middle, you want, instead of 3 system landscape, you wanted to make it 4 system landscape, it's also possible. Again, it depends on you. The idea behind that is you will be centrally able to configure the entire TMS landscape, and you will also be able to configure the tool parameters, that is TP parameters. Okay, and you can, using the central transport domain, you can monitor or you can import the import queue. You can import the actual transport request to each systems. You will also able to display respective import queues. Again, these activities in each specific system is, it can be also controlled by the SAP standard authorization for specific users. And as I said, we can also define quality assurance and acceptance procedures of QA system using TMS. We can also schedule the imports on the systems. Let's say when this import should be, when this changes should be imported. So you can schedule the imports, and we can also perform the imports if it is necessary in the same time. And moreover, we can also transport the changes which is not part of this directory, meaning to say which is not part of this domain. Meaning to say, you have a different system, you have a TR coming from a different system, but that different system is somewhere else. It can be a third party system, or it can be from a different landscape. You are getting this one, so you do not have a common transport directory. In that case as well, you can add the transport to your import queue using the TMS, and you can import the changes. So in general, the TMS enables the SAP basis administrator to centrally manage the transport as well as the configuration of multiple SAP system by defining the transport domain and assigning the transport domain to the transport routes. So what is transport domain? Transport domain consists of many SAP systems which can be managed centrally. Within the transport domain, all SAP systems should have an unique SID. In your network, you can have same SID. You can have SAP system with same SID. However, in the transport domain, you cannot have same SID. It should be unique SID. Okay. In general, we will not have same SID. In very rare cases, we need to do that, because you don't want to change the SID in some cases, you for a temporary reason you just copy it and leave it like that. For testing some for example, let's say when you are having a DSR, you will have same SID in the both the systems. So these kind of scenarios. However, in a single transport domain, you need to have unique SID for all the systems, and there will be only one transport controller, that is domain controller for a transport domain. So in these systems, whichever you are adding into your transport domain, there will be one system which will be called as domain controller. So basically the domain controller is an SAP system where all the TMS configuration settings are maintained, and the changes of the configuration setting are distributed to all SAP system. So you will make it in one, so you will do all the configuration in one SAP system, that is called the transport domain. Then you will distribute to all the other system in the SAP landscape. This is to ensure the TMS configuration settings are consistent throughout the domain. And the transport domain controller stores the reference configuration, and all SAP systems receives the copy of reference configuration from the transport domain. So now we know what is transport domain and transport controller and the transport domain controller. Then let's see what is SAP landscape. So SAP landscape is a set of SAP systems that we know, which shares the customizing repository object via the transport system. The typical SAP landscape, you will see only these three systems which will be created as a domain. However, in a bigger landscape, you will have multiple systems in one domain which have different transport routes. For example, if you see in a single domain, you can have multiple landscape. In case of multinational companies which has a separate landscape which is divided based on the region, based same like what we can see in our picture for Asia Pacific as well as European region, which is separated, which has two separate landscape, but it is centrally controlled in one transport domain. Moreover, you will also have system which for different purposes, for example SAP Business Suite or for ECC or a BI, you will have a different landscape which also can be controlled using transport domain. Now let's see what is the relation between transport domain and transport group. As you can see in this picture, a transport domain can have more than one transport group. Okay, you can have one transport group in the entire domain. Here if you see in the domain 2, you have more than one transport group. That means group 1 sharing one transport directory, one common transport directory, and the group 2 sharing another transport directory, that common transport directory. That is the main difference between domain and group. So now you may think, what could be the reason we need to have two different groups? It is possible in a multinational company. For security reason, we can say you want to keep one transport group closer, one transport group away from the another system landscape. For security reason, you can have two different transport groups which is having two different transport directory. If you don't want to mix up the development happens in two different transport groups, then we can separate it. But however, the two groups are part of a single domain. So to set up a transport domain, first we need to determine which are all the systems which needs to be included in the transport domains. In general, all the system which is in the landscape should be included in the transport domain. However, it is not possible, or not all the SAP systems are available in the initial stage. In the first configuration phase, you may not have all the SAP system to start configuring the entire landscape. So for this reason, SAP have a concept which is called virtual systems. You can create virtual systems in order to configure the transport domain. So let's see how we configure the TMS step by step. This particular slide is quite important, because here you can see the main steps which is involved in the TMS configuration, which is basically broken down into 3 different steps. First one is create transport domain with transport domain controller and define the systems of transport domain. Basically, we will configure the transport domain and define which are all the SAP system which needs to be included in the transport domain in this particular stage. Then the second stage is configure transport route. Here we will configure the transport routes to define the SAP system and the client role within the specific SAP landscape. That is stage 2. Then we have stage 3, which is basically an optional stage where we will configure the QA procedure configurations. This is an optional configuration. Here we will configure the QA procedure to define who is responsible for approving and accepting the changes, and to approve the changes to the productive system. So first let's see how do we initialize the transport domain. So in general, the first system which you are going to start configuring, the STMS, is considered as the transport domain controller. We can switch the domain controller in the later stage. Let's assume if it is not feasible to keep in the same system, you can switch to a different domain controller to a different system. Okay, that is possible in the later stage. So how do we select a system as a domain controller? We need to consider that you are going to save the configurations of your transport domain, for example transport routes and everything, into the domain controller. So that is a central system which is going to control the entire landscape of entire SAP landscape. So we have to carefully select the SAP carefully select the domain controller. The recommended attributes, how do you select the domain controller from SAP, is the system which has the high availability and high security, and we can also see high level of maintenance. So if you see in these cases, the best possible way is to select the productive system as the domain controller, because your productive system always will have high availability and high security as well as high maintenance. But in a practical scenario, if you are implementing an SAP system in the initial stage, you may not implement or you may not install the productive system in the first stage itself. You will start installing a development system, and you will start from the development system, then you will move on to the quality system. In the end only you will install the actual productive system. In that kind of scenarios, selecting a productive system in the initial stage may not be a feasible idea. So as we seen, we can move the controller from we can move the responsibility of the SAP system to be a transport domain controller from one system to another system in the later stage. So in general, if you see, we will select development system as the domain controller. But it is also possible if, let's say, you are having a CUA, central user administration systems. So in generally central user administration system is set up in the initial stage. In that kind of scenarios, if you have a CUA system, CUA means basically the user administration will be done by one central system instead of doing it in different systems. How do we set up the CUA system is basically explained in the security course. So if you have a central user administration system, you can also select that system as your domain controller, because the CUA system generally will have a system which CUA system generally selected based on the high availability systems. So we can select that as well as a domain controller. Now you may think, if we select a normal system as a domain controller, then what will be the load and these kind of things. So in general, if you see, acting as a domain controller in a SAP landscape will take very less resources. So it's not really a resource consuming task in the SAP to be a domain controller. So any system which has high availability or which is available all the time, which is not changed quite often, can be a domain controller. So the resource is not a bottleneck here to select any system as a transport domain controller. So as I said, in the initial stage we can select development as a domain controller, but in any cases be very careful when you are selecting a quality system as a domain controller, because quality system may not be a feasible system for domain controller because of various reasons. In many cases that you will also do system refresh from development to quality systems. If you want to have real-time data in that kind of scenarios, then when you copy the entire system back to quality system, they were total STMS configuration will be refreshed, and it will be a quite complex scenario in that cases. As well as we will do quite a lot of changes in the quality system, may not be a feasible idea to keep it as a domain control. In the ideal scenario should be productive system, otherwise we can start with development system, then you can transfer it to productive system in the later stage. So now let's see what are all the things which will be done as part of TMS. First thing what we need to remember, that TMS configuration is done in the system client 000. Okay, so when you are running STMS transaction code in the system after installing, it will automatically prompt you to initialize the TMS. So you must initialize the CMS system using client 000. If it is a copied system, which we already seen, how can we initialize it using SE06, we will be able to initialize the TMS system. In order to do this TMS administration, we need to have authorization s_cts_admin. This is the authorization generally required to do the TMS configuration. So basically the s_cts_admin is an authorization concept which is required for you to do the TMS configurations. Let's say if you go to our SAP system, go to SU24, go to authorization object, you have s_cts_admin. Execute, then say information. Here you can see the definition of this one is administration function in the change and transport system. So this is the object which is required to do the TMS configuration. So let's go back. When you are doing a configuration in the client 000, first what we will do is you will run the transaction code STMS in client 000. In that stage, this will do quite a lot of activity in your SAP system. So if let's say when you run the STMS, it will prompt you to initialize the SAP system if this is a fresh system. If it is not a fresh system, it will not ask you to initialize the SAP system. And there are many activities which will be automatically carried out when you are running STMS in the client 000. So what it will do is, first it will assign the SAP system as a transport domain controller. Then it will create a transport group which is named as a group underscore SID. It's based on your system, and it will also create a user TMS underscore ADM in client 000. The TMS underscore ADM user is a very important user in client 000 for the system landscape, for the transport management. Then it will automatically generate the RFC destination required for the TMS configuration. It will also create, or it will set up, the domain.cfg file, and it will also define, or it will also set up the tp underscore domain name dot pfl under the transport directory bin of our landscape. This we seen it before. These two files will be created under this particular directory. So in general, this is the file which saves all your TMS configuration, and it will also create the transport domain name, which is domain underscore SID, assuming that this system which you are configuring STMS initially is the domain controller. Then as I said, with the configuration we can still change it, and this particular system will be defined as a transport domain controller. So it is very important things. These particular things are quite important. So you will start the STMS in client 000, then it will create the user TMS underscore ADM in client 00. In any case, we should not manipulate this user. It will also create the RFC destination which is required for TMS by its own. We will see how does it's been done in our system in the later stage. Now we need to understand the steps which is involved in the TMS configuration. Now let us see how we can add an SAP system to an existing transport domain. So in order to add a new SAP system to an existing domain, you must perform the configuration activity in both new as well as in the transport domain. Meaning to say, in the existing transport domain what we have configured, as well as in the new system. Meaning to say, each of the additional SAP system must apply an inclusion in the existing transport controller. Since the configuration of the TMS can only be done in the domain controller, the transport domain controller then must configure the inclusion of each SAP system. So what happens is this system will send a request to your domain controller that it wants it to be included in the system. So when you log into your domain controller and run the transaction code STMS, in the initial screen you will be able to see that there is an inclusion request coming into this domain controller. As we know, the description of the transport domain controller is saved in the file domain.cfg, which is anyway stored in our transport directory with the subdirectory bin. In the common transport directory, all other SAP system connected to this particular transport domain should be able to read this transport directory to read the file domain.config. So during the STMS configuration initialization, it identifies the domain controller of the transport group by this address. If your SAP system does not have a common transport directory, you can manually configure the TMS system with additional by adding the domain controller. In any case where an SAP system has been configured for the TMS and it is approved in the domain controller, you will find the newly created TMS ADM or generated RFC destinations for the TMS system, which we have seen before, that it will be created automatically. Meaning to say the configuration file, meaning to say the domain.cfg should be accessible to this system which we are going to add as well. And once we approve this transport, you can see the TMS ADM as well as the related RFCs were created automatically. Moreover, when you are configuring the TMS system, you should also be aware that when you are creating the destinations, that you need to specify the application server. That means the instances. Okay, this we are talking about one specific SAP system. It may have more than one instances. Then you need to specify which instance you are connecting. So in that cases, you should be quite careful that you need to select the instance which has the high availability in the particular SAP systems. Okay, this also we have to keep in mind. Whenever you add a new SAP system to the existing domain, you need to apply to join in this particular domain from the new system. So in the domain controller, when you log in, you will see this request in the STMS in the initial screen, which needs to be approved by the domain controller. Then only this will be added to this particular domain. The one more thing we have to keep in mind, which is very important, in order to exchange or in order to transfer the SAP development from one system to another system, the entire SAP landscape which we are going to design should be in the same support pack level, or we can say the same release. Okay, it should be same release with the same support pack level. Otherwise, there will be a lot of inconsistency in the objects in the different support pack levels as well as different release. You will not be able to do this one. You will not be able to keep this one in the same domain or the same route. So we need to make sure all systems which you are including in your landscape for a specific transport route should be in same support pack level and the same release. So in the case of a new landscape, when you are designing, it is not possible that you have a production system all the time. In that case, we can also create something called virtual system. We will see how we can create the virtual system in the coming slides. And the communication between the specific transport domains are done using remote call functions. or remote function calls, that is RFCs. So RFC communication is required between each system or between each system which is connected to the particular transport controller or within the same transport domain. The communication between each system happens to this RFC, meaning to say the configuration settings are transferred using the RFCs. So we should not confuse this one. The actual data, let's say if you are transferring from development to quality, your development changes will be transported as a file. It will be exported to the common directory as a file, which will be imported to your quality system or the productive system. So that data is not flowing to RFC. So we have to be very clear about this. The transfer of object, the transport management system works in the OS level. Okay, the RFC communications between the system is used to transfer the configuration setting within the landscape. The reason is, as we know, the configuration of the entire landscape is done in the domain controller, which is in turn replicated to every SAP system which is connected to the domain controller. So for that reason only, for the distribution of the configuration, we use the RFC connections. There will be two RFC connections which will be used. So in general, when you configure SAP, when you configure the TMS, the RFC connection is created by the SAP system. The user which will be used to connect the RFC, which will be used for this RFC connection, is TMS ADM. The TMS ADM user will be created automatically, and this TMS ADM have very limited authorization to transfer the configuration only. However, you can do more activities. If you see here, you have two different RFCs which is created in the system. So one is TMS ADM at the SID, then domain dot, then the domain name. This is automatically created for uncritical actions. Uncritical actions means transferring the configuration informations. Then you have TMS SUP. This is basically RFC connections which can do much more than transferring the configuration. Meaning to say, in the landscape, as we said, we can configure the system centrally, and we can distribute the configuration information using this RFCs. However, you can do much more than the configuration in the landscape to keep it together. Okay, in that cases, for example, scheduling a import in the different system. In that cases, the standard users which we have created, this TMS ADM, may not have authorization to schedule an import in a different system, because this RFC and the user is created for the distribution of the configuration only. In that cases, we will use this RFC, meaning to say the system will use a different RFC, TMS SUP, where you have to specify a user ID and password which have more authorization than the distribution. For example, scheduling the background job or importing the TRs. So this will controlled by different authorization. You need to have that authorization in order to execute that specific functions. This is also related to the security, because everybody who has authorization go to STMS should not be able to import the TR into different systems. So this is controlled in a different way. So if you want to do something apart from configuration, then you need to have authorization to do that specific activity in the TMS in that specific systems. So that user will have authorization beyond this user TMS ADM to do the activity. So in that cases, you will we prompted for the user ID and password, then you can give the user ID and password, then it will execute the specific activity which you would like to do. As we seen, the virtual system which gives you the leverage to add the SAP system based on what you have planned. Meaning to say, the virtual system often included as a placeholder for planned SAP system landscape. In general, for example, when you are starting your landscape, it is not necessary you will have your productive system in place. Generally, you will have development system initially, then you will start working on the development system. In most cases, you will have development and QA, but the production system will be installed later. So in that cases, you can have a virtual system in order to complete the your transport domain configuration. Moreover, you can also use virtual system in the initial stage if you want to release the transport request and keep the transport request in the later stage in the actual system. When it is coming, transport queue is readily available with all the transport requests, which you can import it quite easily. We will see how does the transport queue looks like in the later stage after we configure our SAP system. Meaning to say, you have let's say you have development and quality, but you don't have productive system. Then you create a virtual system and you configure the entire your transport domain. Then when you create a TR from the development system or release to quality system, then once you are done, that particular TR will be available in this queue of the development system. When you create every transport request and release it to the next system, it will be available in the transport queue, that is called import queue. So this import queue will be readily available in the virtual system. So once you add the virtual system, the queues is already there, then you can easily import this one. Otherwise, you will not have the import queues. Then you need to manually identify the TRs which needs to be imported in the productive system or the future system. Okay, that is one more advantage of having the virtual system in your transport domain. Now let's see backup domain controller. Let's assume if an SAP system acting as a transport domain controller fails, then no changes can be made in the TMS configuration. Okay, so SAP therefore recommends you to have a backup domain controller which can take over the function of domain controller in case of this type of failure happens in your transport domain. So in case of failures in the domain controller, the backup transport domain controller can take over, can be activated. Then it will act as a transport domain controller, whereas your development activity or the TMS activity will not be stopped in this kind of situations. So basically, in general, we can see the domain controller and the backup domain controller in TMS itself, but at the moment we did not configure it. Let's say if you go to the TMS if you go to our SAP system, then go to TMS. Right now we did not configure, that's the reason it's popping up. Just skip this one. Then you go to overview. Here if you go to the systems, here you will be able to see, in this one you will be able to see which is the domain controller and which is the backup domain controller in the particular landscape. So right now you can see the TMS is not configured, so we do not have any informations. So let's go back. Next, let's see how to configure the transport control program, that is the TP configuration. The transport control program, the TP, requires the transport profile that contains the information to establish the data connection for all SAP system which is included in the particular transport domain. and also it requires the other technical informations to perform the transport process. The TMS generates and manage this transport profile in the transport domain configuration, which we also know the configuration file and the TP profile files, which is saved in the transport directory inside bin, that is the TP underscore domain name dot PFL. And please remember, the PFL file should not be edited using any operating system editors. As we seen before, when we go to the particular directory, you are able to view or you are able to edit this file. If you go to SAP system, this is our SAP system. If we go to bin, this is the PFL file. If you open it, let's open with the notepad. You can see this file. You are able to edit this file in the operating system level. However, SAP recommends do not edit this file in the operating system level. Okay, this is quite important. Otherwise it will be inconsistent in the operating system as well as in the SAP side. So we should not edit this file in the operating system level. So if you go to our SAP system, you should be able to see the TP profile in STMS. If you go to STMS and system overviews, we can also see the TP profile, which is in turn the information coming from the TP underscore domain dot PFL, which is saved based on the configuration. We can also see this from our SAP systems. Okay, so as we discussed, it is not advisable to edit the TP profile in the OS level, otherwise it will create an inconsistency between SAP and the OS level. Next, let us have a look into the transport layer and transport route. The transport route includes the role of each SAP system and the path and the flow of the transport request. The transport routes basically defines your system landscape. So far what we have seen, how to initialize the TMS, that means transport management system, how we can initialize and how the concept of transport domain and transport group and the domain controller and the backup domain controller is going to work. Next, what we need to do is we need to have a transport route in order to transport the changes between different systems. So although you have the TMS initialized, it is not sufficient to perform the transport of the changes. So we need to define the transport route. So after establishing the domains, if you remember the pyramid what we have seen before, the next step is to define the transport route. So after establishing the transport domain, we should create a transport route from the domain controller. For this we have two methods. We can use the standard configuration, that is SAP standard configuration, which is one system, two system or three system landscape. As we know, three system landscape is recommended by SAP. This configuration basically we can use like a graphical editor. So we can also use the standard configuration. Also we can configure using the graphical editor the non-standard configuration, or if you want to use the standard configuration, edit that one, also possible. So once we create this transport route, we need to distribute the new configuration data to all the systems which is linked to this particular transport domain. To reduce the effects of specific individual transport route, you can use the standard configurations. In the normal scenario, in that case, the routes of the standard configuration are generated automatically. You can choose standard configuration, something like single system standard configuration, or development and production if in case, let's say, two system configuration, or we can also use three system landscape. Let's assume that we use the standard configuration to configure, and we distribute this configuration to all the systems. In these cases, the package, that is the transport layer of the particular package, will not be changed or disturbed. If in case you are doing a change which is more than the standard configuration, in that cases we need to define the consolidation route properly in order to transport the changes. So whenever you are doing any changes in the TMS, you will create a new version of this configuration which you have done, which needs to be activated and distributed to all the systems. Now let's come to transport layer and transport route. So in order to transport any changes, we need to have a transport route to transport or to direct the TRs to a specific route, which is called consolidation and delivery route. Don't get confused with the transport layer and transport route. Transport layer is basically the layer of the packages, how you are going to deliver it. In SAP standard delivery, you will have the transport layer. Each, for example, if you have an ABAP program, this ABAP program needs to be linked to one specific transport layer. So it will follow the specific transport layer. Transport route is not only for ABAP, it is for ABAP as well as customizing, which will be used to transport the TRs using TMS. Okay. So let's see now transport route. In the transport route, we have two types of transport route: consolidation route and delivery route. First, let's see what is consolidation route. The consolidation route is an import-export route, we can call. Generally the consolidation route is from the development system, where the transport request is being exported, okay, to the quality system. In the quality system, we will import the changes which is coming from the development system. Now we are discussing about a typical three system landscape. In the three system landscape, it will be like this. Consolidation route means the route where the development system creates the export file and where the QA system does the import of the particular change of the particular TR. That is consolidation route. We can see it here in the picture. You can see consolidation route, it says DEV and QAS. The typical example what we are discussing is same like which we seen before. DEV as a development system, QAS as a quality system, and PRD as a production system. In this case, the integration system is a development system and the QA system is QAS. So the consolidation route is the route from development to QAS. That is the consolidation route in this scenario. So next, let's see what is delivery route. In a standard three system landscape, a delivery route which is in between quality and production, which is another import route. Okay, in the consolidation route you have export and import. In the delivery route we have only import in the three system landscape. The consolidation route will also have its own name. However, in the delivery route we will not have any names. So the consolidation route from the development to QAS will have a route name. The delivery route will not have a route name. That is one difference here. You can see here transport layer. Transport layer means, for example, all the repository objects are grouped into one logical units, which is called packages, which we have seen it before, which also called as development class. These packages or each packages are assigned to a transport layer, or let's say a consolidation route. So in general, the customizing one. So in general, all the workbench objects will have the package which is created, and that will have the transport layer defined. But in case of customizing object, it is not necessary it is created as a package. However, it will follow the standard transport route which you will be creating, and the standard route will be, let's say, you set SID of the development system. Okay, that will be the standard route for development objects, or that will be the standard route for customizing object. You can also see here integration system. Integration system is where the change are being created, or we can say originated, and which will be assigned to the transport request. Meaning to say, the integration system is the one which you will be doing the customizing as well as the modification of your requirement. Then we have consolidation system. That means the target of the consolidation route. The integration system is DEV. For the consolidation route, the target is QAS, quality system. So that is the target system of consolidation route. So the delivery system is where actual delivery is going to happen. Okay, so that is the QAS here. The source system is DEV and the delivery system is QAS. However, in the delivery route, the source system is QAS and the delivery system is PRT. Integration system, consolidation system, and delivery system. You can see here the three system landscape, the typical three system landscape which we have seen in our previous slides, the consolidation as well as the delivery route. You can see the consolidation route here, which is from SAP. You can see the consolidation route, and this is the development system, this is the QA system. So this is a standard transport layer, that is ZDV will be the standard transport layer in this scenario of three system landscape, and you can see the delivery route which basically does not have any name. Okay, in the consolidation route you have a name here. In the delivery route there will be no names. Okay, this will be the typical three system landscape. However, if you like to make any modification from the standard configuration, this is basically graphical user interface, which we can also see later in our system. Using this graphical interface, you can do the modification in the landscape. If let's say you want to insert additional systems, or you wanted to define new delivery routes, it is quite easy to configure in this particular graphical user interface. If we go to the next one, yeah, here you can see a landscape which is more complex, which is basically created from the existing ones. From the old ones we had three system landscape, and from there we have added additional deliveries and additional systems, additional consolidation routes and additional delivery routes and system. for a complex landscape, let's assume in this here we have two different productive systems. However, the development system is only one. We have a QA system. From development system we are delivering to from development system the consolidation route goes to QA system, as well as we will also uh, import the changes to the training system, which is a separate system. So this is a complex system landscape. You can modify the changes in the graphics user interface of STMS. So once we have done the changes, we need to activate the new version, and we need to distribute the changes to each system. So these changes will be distributed using the RFC what we have seen. Here you can see your productive system is 2, however the development system is only 1. So it is always important that you keep the source system only 1, so that the repository objects are consistent across the landscape. Otherwise the repository object will change, which will make a big imbalance in your entire landscape. We can say customizing, you can keep it different systems, but it will not have much impact like a repository object. However, if you want to have customizing two different systems for customizing, in my recommendation will be, instead of having two different system, you can have additional clients in the same development system. Anyway, the customizing will be client independent customizing. You can differentiate in different clients. However, for the repository changes, development should be done in one specific system, so that it will be transport to all the systems, so that the changes will be consistent in all the system, and make sure that repository changes are transported to all systems. Okay, customizing changes you can transport to individual system, whether in the productive system you can transport or don't transport. It's not a problem, because the programs and ABAP programs, if you know little more into ABAP, if you get into little more into ABAP, this will have its own versions, so it needs to be transported to all systems in order to keep it consistent. Now let us see how does the QA approval process been used in STMS, or how does the QA approval process is used in the transport management system TMS. The QA approval process is also quite important in the critical landscape. It's an optional step in the TMS. If it is necessary to have approval process, then we can implement then we can activate the QA approval process. But let's say if it is not necessary, then we really do not need to activate it. Let's say if you want to have a QA approval configuration, the QA approval in a typical scenario in a 3 system landscape, the QA approval will be done in the quality systems. So what happens is, when you do any development in the development system and you will export the TR, then the TR will be available in the QA system for import. Then you will import it and you will do the testing in the QA system. In that time, the particular TR in the productive system is available in the buffer, but you can see a symbol like this. It's waiting for QA approval. Meaning to say, without approval, even though in STMS, without approval, this TR will not be imported. If we do not have that QA approval, it will be automatically available in PRD or the productive system for import. Okay. In general, whenever you release any transport or whenever you export any TR to the transport directory, the particular TR is automatically added to the consolidation and the delivery systems queues, import queues. So in that import queue, it will be available by automatically. However, if you have QA configured, that will not be green. There will be some status you can see, it will not be green, where it will not be 100% green, whereas you can see a symbol that it's waiting for QA approval process. So once you completed your testing in QA, then the approver of the TR will go to the QA system and say, yes, this can be imported. They will give you the approval. Then it will be available for import in the delivery system, in the production system. Okay, that is QA approval process. This here you can see actual QA approval process, which is configured in the QA system. You can see here, once you configure this, you will also get a symbol here. This is the QA approval system. The definition of how do we define the QA approval system, we can define this is to be approved by the request owner or department owner, what type of approval it is required, meaning to say what type of approval is going to be happen, and also we can define the approval process. Okay, so apart from the QA approval process, this TMS configuration also have quite a lot of tools where you can check the TMS setup, the RFC testing, and the transport directory testing, as well as the TP program also we can check. We will see that in detail in our system when after configuring the STMS. Now let us get more deeper into transport group and transport domain. Let's say if you configure different transport group in your SAP landscape, there will be a need of performing transport between different groups. If there are more than one transport domain in your company, there might be a need to perform the transport from one domain to another domain. So first let's see the transport between two different transport group. Usually in all SAP system in the transport domain, the same common transport directory is being used. There are some situation you would like to separate the transport directories, that means the set of group of directories in a transport group. The common transport directories which are used is basically in a SAP system that is connected to domain through slow or an extensive network connections. Let's say if you have a set of servers which is available in a different location, physically in a different location, which is connected in a low speed internet connection or low speed lease line, in that case accessing the transport directory, central directory from the remote location may be a difficult or a time consuming, may be quite difficult because of the slow speed. In that cases you can have a different directories in that there. The working style will not change anyway. Only what we will have is we will have a replication of all the TRs into the different directories, which you can see it in the picture. Or maybe some security reason, if you want to differentiate, or if you do not want the other system to access the central domain, that case also you can separate the transport directory. Otherwise you are giving access to the entire transport directory from a different domain. You don't want to do that. In that cases you can also separate it. Or in case, let's say your platform, your hardware platform or your operating system preventing to access the central location, in that case also you will be able, you can set up a different directories. You can set up a different group. The second group will have its own transport directory. If you see in this particular graphics, you can see this two system, one is development and QAS, both are in one transport domain. However, we have two transport group. Okay, the transport group 1, the transport group A, which has transport directories which has data files and co-files and buffers, etc. And the QAS, the second system, is in the transport group B, which has its own data files, co-files and buffers. So what happens is, if you create a TR from the development system, then it will be exported to this particular transport directory. Once you add this transport to this QAS buffer, then the files will be copied or needs to be copied from development system to the QAS system. You can also see in that particular time these kind of marks, that means the files are not copied. In that cases you can manually synchronize this copying or manually trigger the file copying. The difference will be, there will be a little bit difference. Let's say the log file which will be centrally available in case of the transport directories in the same central location will be little bit different in this case, because the log files, what you will do here will be saved here, but the log files here will be a different log file. So that will be a little bit difference in the log file. You need to compare this, you need to combine this both, then only you will be able to get the exactly logs. If it is in a central location, the log file is going to be more better than the distributed transport directories. Meaning to say, the log what you will get from one group, one transport group, is specific to the transport group. The log you will see for the next transport group will be specific to this transport group. Let us start setting up the TMS setup in the system, then it will be quite easy to understand the whole concept. So for us, we will start a landscape. For the exercise, we have two systems. So we will build up our landscape like this. We have our ECC system. This will be a development system, okay, and we have our ECQ system. We have two system landscape, ECQ system, let's say ECQ. So at the moment this is a productive system. Let's assume this is a productive system, okay. So what we want to do, we can have a common directory for these two. To make our exercise more interesting, we will create two groups, ECC one group and ECQ one group. Then you will have a two transport group but with a single domain, okay. That's what we are going to see here, okay. So we have two SAP systems. So we will be using our two SAP system, ECC and ECQ, and let's go to the two SAP system. This is ECC system. Let's go to if I go to the ECC system, open the Windows Explorer, then we have USR SAP trans, and let's say this will be our group ECC, which is under C colon, or this let's say is ECC demo, that is the server name, then SAP trans, that is the share, then trans. This will be the location for the first group to save the TR files. Here the second system is this one, ECQ, the system name, the host name is ECCQA01. Let's go to the command prompt. Host name, that is ECQQA01, that is ECCQA01 slash SAP MNT SAP trans SAP MNT trans. So if let's say if I from ECQ, if I open this one, I should be able to see this is now I'm in ECQ server. Let me try to open the folder from here. It's also very important that you need to make sure you are able to reach the server properly. So say ECC demo slash SAP MNT slash trans. The ECC ADM or let's say let's ping from here. We can also check the ping. Yeah, we are able to open it. Yeah, this is on ECC demo. We are able to open it. ECC demo. Okay, that is in the same way we can also open the ECC QA01 slash SAP MNT slash trans ECQ ADM, then okay, so we can reach both the servers from the alternate servers, so that looks fine. So let me close this one now. We also don't need this. Our MMC console. Okay. Now let's get into the SAP side and start configuring it. So the domain controller will be the ECC system. That's what we want to do. So let's log into ECC. Seems to be ECC have some problem. Let's check. The dispatcher got stopped. So here is our two SAP system, ECC and ECQ, and in our landscape what we are going to do, this ECC is going to be, so the ECC is going to be our domain controller, and ECQ we will add it to this domain controller, and this is going to be two system landscape as we said. Then we will see this as well as this will be two different groups, target groups. So we wanted to have two different transport directory in these cases. Okay, let's start with ECC. So first configuration, start with the domain controller. Let's log into the client 000 with SAPstar. To start the configuration, we will go to the transaction STMS. Here you can see it's going to start the configuration. This pop-up screen will come only if the TMS is not configured. Okay, if it is configured, you will not see this particular pop-up message. Okay, in all the systems, whenever you start STMS in the initial stage, you will get this pop-up message. Here you can see you want to create this system with this following domain name. Domain name is domain_ECC. So the first system you are going to start STMS going to be the domain controller. Okay. So even if you start STMS in the second system, you will get the same screen. However, you have a button here, other configuration. If you go to the other configuration, then you can add the system to a different domain controller. Okay, you can give the target host and the system, then it will add to the different domain controller. Okay, so right now this is going to be our domain controller. So we just in this initial screen, if in case you wanted to have a different domain name, you can change it here, or description, whatever you like to change it here, you can change it here and say save. This configuration may take a little while because it has to save, it has to do a lot of configuration behind the screens in the SAP system, as well as it will also create the domain.configuration file, as well as tp domain.plf file for the landscape. Okay, now you can see it says inserted successfully, and this is a system. This is the transport domain which we are going to use, domain_ECC. Now if you go to system, now you go to overview and systems, you can see we have one system in our domain. If you see this symbol, that means this is the controller. The more system you add, you will have additional systems here. Okay, right now if you can see the status is active, the configuration is up to date. Anyway, this is only one system, so the configuration is saved in the local system. Okay, now let's see how we can add an additional system to this particular domain. So let us log into our ECQ system. Here go to line 000, then start the transaction code STMS. Here it says you added to the existing domain, because this was part of this domain, we removed it and put it back. So in these cases, let's say if you want to switch to a different domain, you can go to other configuration, then you will get the options here. You want to include the system into a domain or configure a new domain. You can also configure a new domain, same like what we did for the ECC system, or you can also include this into a existing domain. Okay, this is now the configuration for existing domain. Let me go back again, start again. Let's go back, go to STMS. Okay, you select this and say include system in domain. That means we are going to include it in the existing domain. Okay, this is because this is a system which we tried. This is a system which was copied from different systems, as well as a lot of configuration was done. So That's the reason you get the screen not same as ECC, because ECC is a fresh system, so you got it very clearly there. So let's say I will say include the system in a different domain. You can see the system is ECC, the system name and the description, and this is the host. This is a domain controller which we are going to insert the system. The domain controller is ECC demo, and the system number is 00. System number is based on what we get here. Change. Yeah, this is the one. System number CC00, and which we already know. This is a ECC demo system. Yeah. Okay. And the user which we are going to use, TMS ADM. That's what we have seen it before. That it will automatically create this user, and it will also create this RFC automatically. We will see that. Now I say save. Now it will automatically contact the domain controller to register this system as one of the system in the particular transport domain. Okay, now it is saved. Say the system waiting to be included in the domain controller. Okay, right now the system send a request, but we have a warning message says the SAP system waiting to be included in the domain controller. So domain controller has to accept this system to be included there. Right now it send the request. Now if you go to the domain controller, then you should be able to see the request there. Now if you go to overview and systems, now we are still in ECQ. We are trying to find out what are the systems available. Now you can see we have two systems, ECC and ECQ. Okay, right, still we are in the ECQ system, we are not in the domain controller, and you can see here waiting to be included. So this has to be approved by the domain controller. Now we are in the ECQ system. We just wanted to see how many systems are there, meaning to say you will be able to view the landscape, entire landscape, from all the system wherever the STMS was included or wherever the STMS is configured. Okay, right now this is still waiting. Let's log into our ECC system. That's the domain controller. Let's go back and come back to STMS. You can see you are logged into the domain controller. This is one of the indications saying that this is the domain controller. Instead of going to see here to the systems, you can also see it from there. Okay, now you can see here it says waiting to be included. I will select this. I say system is waiting to be included in the domain. Now you select this and say approve. Okay, so this needs to be approved by the domain controller. This you cannot do it in ECQ system. This activation cannot be done in the ECQ system, that you have to log in to the domain controller. If we go to ECQ system, okay, this system is waiting to be included in the transport domain. If you go here, go to systems, you can still, this is waiting to be included, but you cannot see the activate, but you cannot see the approve button here. Okay, that's the difference. So you need to go to ECC system. Okay, select the system and say approve. It says note long text found, include the system ECQ in transport domain. Say yes. Now it's doing some configuration, adapter configuration. A new transport group is created for ECQ system. Okay, by default it came to a different transport group. Okay, use a group underscore ECQ. That's what exactly we want. We will also see how to change this transport group and make it as a single transport directory in the later stage. So now if you see, this is active. Okay, now we have approved the request from the EC2 system. Now let me go back to EC2 system, go out and come back to STMS again. Now you can see the warning message is already gone. Okay, so if I go back to the overview systems, you can see we have two system which is included in this landscape. So what we have seen so far is that we have included two system in the landscape. Okay, that is the first step. So this is the domain controller, this is the system we just added. Okay, now let's go back to ECC system. Now we want to make any changes here. You can select this and go here. You can select the system and go to system and go to change. Then you should be able to make changes here. Okay, but if you go to ECQ system, here also we have the same screen. We can see both the systems. Q system, you select here, go to changes. We came to the changes, but it went to the display mode, and you can also see the message changes only permitted in domain controller system. Here you will not be able to make any changes in the particular system. So you have to make all the changes of this particular landscape into the domain from the domain controller. You cannot do these changes. So if I go to the change option, you say change only permitted in the domain controller. So as soon as you add the system to the domain controller, you are not allowed to make any changes. You can also see the transport directory which is coming in here. This transport directory means the where the bin is located, the configuration is located. Okay, don't confuse this one. This transport directory means where the configuration is located. Okay, it's not the data and co-files of the actual data and the log file. There, this configuration means where the domain controller, let's say if I go to ECC system, go to the systems, here also you can see transport directory trans. Okay, the trans. So this is two different things. Even though you have two different transport group and two different transport directory, the configuration needs to be saved in one central location, which is your domain controller. So the domain controller location will be always be there in the trans directory. That does not mean the data file and co-file and the logs are going to be saved here. Okay, inside this we have bin, data file, co-file and logs, which is the most important ones. So this means the configuration which is saved. Okay, in our scenario what we want is we wanted to have two different groups and two different target groups which need to have two different directories. That's what we are trying to do now. Now if I go back, you can see the groups. We have two different groups, which is ECC group and ECQ group. Okay, if it is same group, you will not find the group name here. We will see that later when we will change this group name, and we will see how to configure this one, which is actually quite easy. So if you wanted to change the group name, it's quite simple. You select and go to the change and go to communication, and you can see the group name here. You can select and change to the different group. So the group will be automatically created. You can simply change it here. Okay. Okay, right now you can also see you have the domain controller, which is ECC, and you do not have a backup domain controller. If you have a backup domain controller, then you can configure it here. So right now we don't do that. Let's go back. Now the second step is that we need to add the transport route. That's what we have seen before. So we need to add the transport route. So for this, let's make it quite simple now. Let's go to the transport route. You can see the symbol here. This is transport route. Okay. So if here you can see both the system ECC and ECQ systems. So all the system available in the landscape will be displayed in the top. Okay. So to make it very simple, let's create a two system landscape with the standard configuration. That is the most easiest thing to do. That is the very simple way to do this route configuration, transport route configuration. If you go to configuration, then you can see standard configuration. Then you will see the standard configuration. Then you can add the configuration here, but right now it's grayed out because it's in the display mode. Okay, let's go to the change mode. Okay, now we are in the change mode. Go to configuration again, go to start configuration. You can also do configuration for single system, development and productive system, that means two system landscape, and three system in a group, that is three system landscape. Right now we have only two system. Let's do two system landscape, development and production. Then it will ask you what is our development system. Our development system is ECC. Our productive system is ECQ. Okay, then say continue. Now you can see it automatically created the transport route for this particular TMS landscape. Okay, let me this bigger. You can see this is the system ECC, and you can see is ECC, the transport layer is been automatically created by the system. Okay, that's what we have seen it before. By default, the transport layer will start with Z and the system ID of the particular domain controller. Okay, so the transport layer is created is at ECC for the customizing, and we have the SAP standard transport layer, and this is the ECQ system. So now we have created this configuration. This configuration is right now in the domain controller only. Okay, now I will save this configuration. Once you select the save button, now it will ask you to give some description, some short description. Basis training two system landscape. Okay, I will save this. Once you save, it's asking you, do you want to distribute the activated configuration across all the systems? So right now the configuration what we have done is only available in the ECC. So do you want to distribute it? If you say yes, now it is start distributing. You can see here you can see the status, it started distributing to the system. Now you got the action log. The 6 request was corrections. There was the old TRs which was existing in the system, which was the target was changed to ECQ because some TRs, the old TRs, the target is changed based on the development class. It is changed the target, or based on our configuration of transport layer. Based on our configuration of the transport layer, the target is changed to ECQ. Okay, now let's go back. Okay, now our transport route is defined. If I go to ECQ system, I should be able to see the target. I should be able to see the route, the transport route is already distributed to the ECQ system. This is our systems. Let's go back to the initial screen, then go to transport route. You can see here that the transport route is already available in the ECQ system. Okay. Now let us have a look into the RFC connections which was created automatically in both the systems. Let's go to ECC system first. I go to SM59. Go to ABAP connection. You can see there is one connection which is created, TMS ADM ECC domain ECC dot domain underscore ECC. Okay, this is for the internal connection. If I go to the logon detail, you can see TMS ADM user was automatically used here, and you can also see this is a generated one. You cannot change this here. It is not possible to change these RFC connection because these are all generated RFC connection, so we should not change this. Okay, and we have one for ECQ domain underscore ECC. Okay, here you can see the target server is ECC QA01, and here also you can see this is the user. The user will be created in all the system by SAP automatically. And we can also see the RFC connection TMS SUP, which we have seen. This RFC connection is used not for distribution of the configuration. This RFC connection is used if in case we will do some activities which is not part of the configuration. Okay, so we have two RFC connections for ECC and ECQ like that. If I go to this one, if I go to the logon security information, here you can see the user is blank. So what it will do is it will pop up a message that what is the username and password you want to use to log in, because the username and password is not saved here. If I go to the user /NSU01 TMS ADM, this is the user which is created, and if I go to the profile, it has one profile which says authorization for system user TMS ADM. So it has a standard profile. It will be automatically assigned to this user. Okay, same like that. If I go back to ECQ system, this is our ECQ system. Let's go to SM59. Go to ABAP connection. Here you can see this created ECC and ECQ systems, same like the ECC system, same like we have created the RFC connections for both the systems, internal as well as external systems. Okay, now let's go to our ECC system. Go to STMS. Now let's see how do we distribute the changes manually from the domain controller. So far what we have seen is whenever you did any changes, it asks you, do you want to distribute it? We distribute it. If in case the distribution did not work properly or we skipped something, then we can manually distribute the changes. Let's say if you are adding a new system, okay, we added the new system, you want to distribute the changes, then you can go to here extras and say distribute and activate configuration. Once you say distribute and activate configuration, you can distribute only to specific system, okay, which does not have the current configuration. In that case, we can distribute only to that specific system, or if you want to distribute to all system, it will distribute. If even it has the updated version, it will still distribute the changes also. Okay, then you can see it's distributing the changes. Okay, this is the manually you can distribute the change, and you have quite a lot of options here. uh, if let's say when you are creating, somehow it did not generate the RFC properly, then you can also generate the RFC destination for the systems, and also you can reset the user of TMS ADM. For some reason you think that okay, this RFC connections is not performed properly, or let's say if I go to let's say if I go to SM59, I wanted to check whether the RFC is working or not. If I go here and say select one of the RFC destination and say connection test, here it's fine. Let's say it's an error, so you wanted to make some changes in this configuration and the target name was incorrect or whatever it may be, but you cannot do the changes here. Okay, it is not possible to change. It will be always in the display mode because it's a generated version. So in that cases, what we need to do is go to STMS, go to the system, then you generate RFC destination. So it will create a new RFC destination. That means it will regenerate the RFC destinations. Or if you want to reset the password, or if you want to reset the user, we can also reset the users. We also have quite many options here. You can see this is for refresh. If you want to refresh it, you can use this refresh button to refresh it. And the next one is connection test. This is very important one. Let's say you wanted to check the connection to ECQ, whether the connection is working fine, then you can select the system and say connection test. It will test the connection. You can see here and say connection to the system ECQ host ECC QA01 is okay. So this is a very useful one. You can also do the connection test. And the next one is display configuration, to display the configuration. And this one is lock the system. If you want to lock the system temporarily for some reason, you can lock the systems. And this one is also quite useful to distribute the configuration, to update the configuration. Let's say you added the system, you want to update the configuration, you can simply select and say update the configuration. Say this is the same screen which we got it before. Yeah, update the TMS configuration to system ECQ. That means it will update the system configuration to that specific system. Say yes, then it will start updating the configuration. And this is for the transport domain. We will come to this again. If you select here, you can see the transport domain which we are using is domain underscore ECC. This is the transport domain options. We will come back to this one, the approval process and all this thing in the later stage. And you can also see distribute and activate TMS configuration. This is for the all system. That's what we seen it through the menu. And we also have some personal settings. You can add personal settings here. Okay, so now what we will do is, let's see how to go to the import queue. Okay, so if in the initial screen, if you see there is a truck, if you select this, it says import overview. If you select this, you can see the queue of all the system which is connected into this particular landscape. If I refresh, I can see with the queue of ECQ have 3 TRs, and ECC does not have any TR because that's a development system. So if I double click here, you can see there is 3 TRs already available in the ECQ system landscape. Okay, so now what we are doing is from ECC system we are monitoring ECQ import queue. Okay, you should be very careful about this one, which import queue you are monitoring. This is coming through TMS. Otherwise you have a separate transaction code, let's say TMS underscore import. This will take you to the import queue of the particular system where you have logged in. Right now we are in ECC, it has 0 TR to be imported. Okay, and if I go to ECQ TMS underscore import, and remember, whenever you go to the import queue, always use refresh. Now you cannot see the TRs which we supposed to see. Why we are seeing the TRs? Because this TRs was created earlier and it did not had any target. You also seen when we configured, it said that this TRs has been adjusted, so it automatically went to the queue. Let's say refresh. When you refresh, I got all the TRs. Okay, so now let's see how the TRs will be important to different queues. So for that we need to go to ECC system. Now let's create a TR. Okay, so TR, we will log into the client 001. So let's log in to 001 using our user ID SAP basis. So let's assume now we are trying to create some changes in the development system and we wanted to use the newly created transport route or the transport domain and to transport the changes from ECC to ECQ. So let's do one thing. Maybe let's create a role PFCG, and I will create a role Z underscore BC training role 01. Let's say create single role and go to menu, go to transaction, add a transaction SU01, test role for testing transport, go to authorization, go to the change mode, okay. Here what we need to do, we need to save this profile and generate this profile. Okay, just ignore all the error messages. We just wanted to see how does the transport works now. Okay, now here to transport this role, generally we need to select this transport role and also generated profile, say okay. Okay, okay, now it's asking you to create the tier. Let's create the tier. Let's say BC basis authorization changes, new role for transport test. Okay, the target is ECQ. Okay, so when you are working on the TRs, you need to always select the target. You can have more than one target. Let's say in a complex scenarios you have different targets you can create in the routes. Right now the target is only one because this is a two system landscape. It's an ECQ system. Let's save this. Now this is the TR number. Okay, I will copy this TR number and put it in our file for reference. Now say OK. Now this is the role which is included in the particular TR. Okay, if I go to SE01 /n SE01, go to display, put the TR number and say display. You can see the TR number and the task inside, and what is inside is this role, and which also have some table entries here. This all information is already available. Okay, now we need to see what happens when we release the TR in the transport directory in the operating system. Okay, so how do we know where this is being saved? In the STMS, what we have seen, the transport directory is basically specifying the bin. Okay, that means if I go to STMS, okay, do not get confused with these two different things. The STMS, where it says, if I go to systems, each system, you can see the transport tool. This transport directory means the configuration, where the configuration of the STMS is being saved. Okay, so if you really want to see where the actual files are being saved, then we need to go to AL11. Okay, this is for displaying SAP directories. Here you can create your own directories. However, SAP has its pre-delivered directories, which also have one directory which is called dir_trans. Okay, you select this dir_trans. You can see here /ECC demo/SAP MNT/trans. Okay, this is the directory. Here SAP MNT is the share. Let's say if I, from the notebook which I am working, if I access the same directory /ECC demo, this is the server. If I go to the server, you can see we have SAP log and SAP MNT. This is the transport direct. This is the SAP MNT share which is coming from there. Then you have the transport directory where you have all the informations. This is a bin where you have all the configuration which is been saved, and we have the co file and data file. There is the only two place where you will save the TR content. Okay, so let's go to the server itself, or okay, we are already here. This is ECQ. Let's go to Windows Explorer. C drive, USR SAP trans. If I go to the data file, we do not have any files here, no data files. If I go to the core files also, there is nothing, so it's blank. So we do not have any TR which is in the OS level. Okay, and this also you can view it from SAP. If you go to AL11, you select this dir underscore trans, double click, you select the data file. You can see this is the two files which we can see in the operating system. Okay, so from SAP you really does not need to go to the OS level and see the files. From here also you can see the files. Okay, let's go back. So in order to understand the whole concept, we are, and right now I am switching. So if you are really working in SAP, if you wanted to see the file in OS, you really do not need to go into the OS. You can use A11 and see the file is created or not. Okay, in general you can also use this A11 to see text files. What is inside the text files also can be read from here. Let's say for example, if I go to bin, if I say domain dot configuration, if I double click here, you can see what is the information here. Okay, this is the domain underscore ECC. This is the one which we are presently working. If I go to the TP domain underscore ECC dot PFL, where it has the TP configuration, you can see the actual TP configuration here. Okay, here you can see the transport directory is only one. Okay, and you have two systems, one is ECC and another one is ECQ. So this trans directory is going to be same for all the system which we are going to add, so it's not specific to one system. Okay, okay, now let's release the TR what we have created. Go to SE01, let's see. Okay, SE01, this is a TR which we have created, the 18. Select this, then we can release this TR. First we need to release the task, after that we need to release the TR. Once you release the TR, then this TR will be available in the buffer of ECQ system. So before that I want to go to ECQ system. This is a ECQ system. Here we have some TRs which is already here. I think I will delete these TRs because this is creating a little bit of confusion here. Let's, how to delete the TR from the import queue, you can select here. Actually it will not delete the actual files from the OS, but just remove it from the import queue. Okay, we will come to this later, just wanted to start from beginning in order to avoid some confusion. So I will go to then you go to request and say delete 31. Yes, it's deleting only from the import queue, but if you go to the operating system, it will be still the files for related to this one is already will be still there. So we just delete from the import queue. Now the import queue is clean. If I go to the OS of this system, if I go to Windows, user, trans, data files, you can see these files are still there. Okay, it's not deleted from the files. So start from fresh. I just wanted to delete this because I just wanted to start from beginning as fresh. Data file, core file also I will delete. Okay, so the system is clean now. So I wanted to start from fresh. Okay, okay, now let's assume we do not have anything here. Okay, the ECQ is clean, and we go to ECC system. This is client 0000001. Now here we need to release this TR. So if I go to here, right now we do not have any files. This is the ECC system. Okay, We do not have any files in the data folder. Let me release it. Okay, now I released. Now it will automatically create the files in the OS. You can see TP is connecting to the database and it's writing to the buffer, and it's doing quite a lot of work. It has to collect all the objects which is related to the particular role which we have created. Then it will start creating the files in the operating systems. Now it's doing the export. You can see the log export. That means it's exporting the objects to the OS. You can see here it's created a file. There's something r90018.ecc. Okay, now you can see the export is completed. Now you can also see the selection for import in the ECQ. Also it did something. Okay, it exported here. This is the file, the data file, and which should also have a co-file. If I go to the co-file, here also it created one more file. The co-file start with K dot the system ID. Okay, K then running number dot system ID means it's a co-file, and R running number dot system ID is a data file. So we know which system it's come from and what is this file, whether it's a data file or co-file. Data file will be generally bigger, which has all the datas, and the co-file generally will be quite small. You can see the co-file is 1 KB and the data file is 17 KB. Okay, this is a very small thing what we have created. That's the reason it's quite small. If you have a lot of objects, then the data file will be quite bigger. Okay, and you can also copy this file and send it to different places, okay, different systems, and then you can put this file into the transport directory like this manually, and you can add it in the import queue. Now right now what we are trying to do is we are going to transport. Right now we release from here. Okay, now if I go back to the ECQ system, okay, this is the ECQ system import queue. I'll just say refresh. You can see the file, you can see the TR is already available in the import queue. Okay, this means the data file still to be transferred. That means the data file is in the ECC system. It is still not transferred into ECQ system. If I click here, otherwise if I select this one, this will adjust the all import queue. This is for only specific import queue, either this one. If you have more than ones, then you can use this one. So select. Now it will copy the files by its own to the ECQ system. The transport file for one transport request from import request ECQ. Say yes. Now it is copying the files. Now this is our ECQ system. It should copy here. So if you use the common transport directory, then we do not need to do this, because it's anyway going to read from the common transport directory. Okay, in our case it's not common transport directory. That's the reason we have to do this. It has to copy the files here. Okay, let me go here, go to the Windows Explorer. Go to C drive, USR, SAP, then go to trans. Here we can see the co-file. The co-file is copied. We can see the same co-file, and the data file also copied. Okay, so if I go to A11 here, so if I go to A11/NAL11, go to transport directory, here dir underscore trans, we can see the data file as well as co files. Okay, the AL11 here you can see the host name is different, the local host. Okay, we can change this to a single host, then we do not need to copy it. Okay, right now we are trying to make a complex scenario here, so we have two different transport directory. Now in the ECQ system, so the TR is already available in the ECQ system. Now let's see how to import this TR. To make it quite simple, now I will select this TR and say the import request, the small truck. Select this. We need to specify the target client, which client you want to import. Right now we are in the client 000, but we want to import this into 001. Okay, this particular TR is not imported with client specific. You can also specify to specific client. Now we have created a very simple scenario where you do not have client specific routes. Okay, so I'll put the target client, I'll say execute. Now it will start importing the TR. The following option, asynchronous mode, I'll say yes, the client 001. Now you can see this simple here. Now it says import is running, that means the import is running right now. Okay, if you really wanted to see the status, we need to keep refreshing because this will not refresh automatically. Okay, so you need to refresh. And moreover, from any client you can import the TRs to any client. Okay, meaning to say STMS import can be run from any client, and you can run the import of different clients as well as the same client. Let me refresh again. Okay, now you can see the status went to yellow. That means request is ready to be imported again. That means it's already imported. Okay, now if I go to client 001 in ECQ system, because right now we are in ECQ 000, and you will not be able to see the role here, so we need to go to 001 because this role is client specific data, it's a customizing data. So let's go to okay, we don't have this user here. Let me use the standard user. Go to SE01 and wanted to see the log of this particular TR first. So let's copy the TR number, go to display here, display. We can see that TR is already here. If the TR is not available in ECQ, then you cannot see this log. Okay, I'll go to log. Here you can see the log. The TR was exported from ECC system and it is imported to ECQ system. Okay, okay, there is little bit of difference in the times because this two system was different, running in a different dates. That's the reason we have two different time, date and time. You, in your actual cases, you should have synchronized the date and times, then this problem will not come. Here we have two different dates, so it's fine. This is on 25 and the other one is on 24. Okay, never mind. Okay, now if I go to PFCG, I want to check the role which we have created, whether it is imported properly in the same way which we have created. The role name was something is set. Yeah, this was the role name. It's already in the buffer. Okay, let's see. Now this is the role which just came here in the ECC system, sorry, in the ECQ system. You can see it is created by SAP basis and all the information is already available here. We successfully created the transport domain with the controller, and we also created the route with the two system landscape, and we have created a TR and imported to the destination. This is two system landscape. Okay, now if I go to ECC system, SC01, TR. Here you can see here it does not give you what we did in the ECQ system. It says continue the other transport G group. That means it does not have more information because it's a different transport group and the log files are not available in this system. Okay, so that will be one problem if you are using two different target groups. Then the logs, you need to combine two different logs in order to get the actual logs of the particular transport request. Okay, if it is the same system, if it is the same directory, then you can have the logs in the same location, then the same log will be available in each systems. Okay, now let's say if you want to keep it in the same directory, or you do not want to have two different target groups, then how do we do that? If I go to TMS in ECC, it's quite simple. Right now we have two different group. Let's say I wanted to use ECC group only, then I go here and say change, go to communication, instead of ECQ I want to use ECC. Now it's changing the adapters. Now if I go back, refresh, now you can see both is changed to ECC group. Okay, go back and say TMS systems. Now we can see the group, particular group is gone because it's all same group. Okay, now you need to do one more thing, because the transport directory is now different in different systems. If I go to /AL11, here the transport directory is different, and if I go to ECQ system, ECQ000, then I go to STMS, to overview systems. You can see the same configuration is distributed here. If I go to A11, the transport directory is still on ECC QA01, which is incorrect. So we need to change this one to one transport directory. So for that, SAP have different ways we can do that. The first one is using the standard transport directory hostname. If I go to, let's say, in the Windows hostname, standard hostname, if I go, how do we change the hostname? With the Windows standard hostname, let's say you can specify the IP address of each systems to have the name resolution for the IP address. So there, if I go to systems, let's say drivers etc host, here you will specify the host. Here if you specify, let's open notepad. Here if you specify, let's say your IP address, whichever you wanted to define as a central transport directory, it can be the same SAP server or it can be a different SAP server. It can be the same domain controller or it can be different one. If it, let's say in our domain controller we wanted to use the this as a transport host, then you can say SAP trans host, then you specify the IP address 192.168.1.52 in our case. Then when you restart the system, if you specify it like that, when you restart the system, SAP checks whether you have a host defined like that, then this will be replaced by the host name SAP trans. Okay, the same case it will happen in all the system. You specify SAP trans, one specific IP address, one host name, then everywhere it will change automatically when you restart the system. Okay, so that host name, that host will become the transport host. Okay, that's the way to do it. That's the best way to do it. Let's say if you do not want to use the SAP trans, or you wanted to use the actual server name there, that also possible, but that you need to specify it in the instance profile. Okay, we know how to change the instance profile. In the instance profile you can specify dar trans equal to which is the host name. That is the second method of doing it. But SAP recommended method is to modify that host file, which is SAP trans, then it will automatically change to SAP trans, then it will become one directory, one common directory where all the transport files are being saved. Then in that case you do not need to adjust the consistency and move the transport file from one place to another place. Okay, so let's go to ECC and I will put it back. Go to the systems, go to change. So the ECQ is not there, so I just wanted to add, let's say ECQ, save. Want to distribute immediately? Yes. Now we back to our old configuration. We go here to STMS. overview systems. Okay, we are back to the old configurations. Okay, now let's go back to our presentations. So we have created a very simple configuration with two system landscape. We also seen how we can have two transport groups, and we also seen how we can keep it in a single transport directory using the SAP trans host name, as well as we can also change it in the profile name. But right now let's keep it like this. Let's go back to presentation. Okay, with this we are coming to the end of this particular session. Thank you very much for listening. I will see you in the next session. Bye bye.